Good morning, folks. I'm going to show you a lot about vertical versus vertical atoms today. And I'm going to show you a couple different vertical versus vertical atom moves that link together in a coherent way. So you can kind of see how this system operates in a bigger scale than just an atom somewhere. So I'm going to start by demonstrating the two easiest atomic buzzsaws. I'm going to do my buzzsaw 45-degree angle from the camera so that when I bend the ends out, you'll be able to see the perpendicularness, right? So here's my buzzsaw. I'm going to start by bending the end that's farthest away from me, the edge of the orbit that's over here. I'm going to bend that out, each poi in 45 degrees, which will add up to a 90-degree separation. One of them is in wheel plane towards the camera. One of them is wall plane, perpendicular to the first one, right? And that looks like this from the top. I'm going to bend that back to my normal buzzsaw and bend the edge of the orbit that's closest to me. I'm going to bend it out, 45 each poi, 45 and 45 gives me the sweet 90. So that's the other way you can get into your buzzsaw. So once I've bent that, I can bring my hands together. I can put it in between my arms for that buzzsaw kind of feel. Bend it back, bend the far edge out, same thing. Atomic buzzsaw that way, or atomic buzzsaw this way. Boom. Now, instead of doing them in this tilted orientation, I'm going to be demonstrating everything with vertical versus vertical. When I say vertical, vertical, vert, anything like that, what I'm referring to is both of the planes are vertical. They're just at perpendicular angles to each other, 90 degrees to each other. So that's the VertVert atom right there. So we're going to consider both of those buzzsaws I just demonstrated, the wheel plane or hall plane feeling one. It's not a wheel or wall plane or a hall plane or anything like that. It's perpendicular planes. But there's a feel that is very, well, watch from the side. It looks like split same going forward, right? This looks like split same from the side. This looks like a wall plane split same. If I tip it up, you can see that they're perpendicular to each other, but they feel like they're both going that direction. And the way I'm facing them feels kind of wall plane-ish. And then we can turn around and we have our reverse, just like that. Feels like a reverse buzzsaw. So that's what I mean with the wheelish, wallish. There's another thing that happens. If I have my perpendicular planes and I take and I separate my hands so that the poi don't have any way to tangle, and I turn myself 90 degrees, I'm going to end up perpendicular again, but you'll notice that instead of, like when I'm this way, the tethers will mesh together. There's no collision. They just kind of flop over each other. But if I turn 90 degrees, the tethers will connect. Give me this tangle or our air wrap. So the first drill I would like you to do to experiment with this, how this works, is just take a buzzsaw, bend one edge of the orbit out. Eventually, I want you to bend both out, but choose whichever one you want. I'm going to demonstrate by bending the edge of the orbit that's close to me out. So I have this. It looks like this from the front. Looks like this from 45 degrees. And it looks like this from the side. Now, I'm going to separate my hands so that there's no possibility of collision. I'm going to take the direction I'm turning, which is going to be my left. I'm going to swing the other arm over, a 2-beat, so that it's on the same side of my body. And I have this. Then I'm going to take the other one, 2-beat, so it's on the other side. Continue turning, so I've done 180, and experiment with the reverse atomic buzzsaw. You'll see how these two things mix together. So let's do that again, but instead of bending the front, the close edge of the orbit, let's bend the far edge of the orbit. We'll do the same thing. Here's my atom. It looks like this from the front, this from 45, looks like this from the side. So now we'll do the same thing. Separate your arms so they can't tangle. Turn 90. Okay, here we go. And then keep going. Now we're in the reverse of where we started. I'm going to show you something. I've got this diagram here. A lot of the stuff I was just talking about is demonstrated here. So if you're standing here or here and you bend the far edge of the orbit, you'll get a cross point between your arms. The gap is the center of rotation where your hands would be. The blue represents positive polarity, means the edge of the orbit that's moving up. The red represents the edge of the orbit that's moving down. So every orbit of our poi has a polarity, right? Polarity is just one side is doing one thing, one side's doing the opposite. So this is the up side. See, the poi's moving upward away from the ground. We reach this point here, and now we're on the down side. Now it's moving downward towards the ground. We could consider the same polarity, but we could say this one's moving to our right, and this one is moving to our left. Top is right, bottom is left. See? So there's an oppositeness, and that's important for this stuff because it's the way it works. So with this, you can see that's the positive, that's the negative. Positive, negative. Positive, negative. So these are your buzzsaws. And then when you turn that 90 degrees, we're in this mixed polarity here where it's one positive, one negative, one positive, one negative. There's another thing that you might notice. If you start here, where you're standing outside the box like this, and you turn 90 degrees, you'll be inside the box with that lateral polarity thing. But if you start the one where you bend the edge of the orbit that's close to you out, you end up here, turn 90 degrees, and you might have noticed, now we're outside the box. There's like an invert where in this version, you know, my buzzsaw version, it is inside the box. Now I turn 90, I'm outside the box here. And then this way again. So hopefully what you've gathered from this is that there are two different atoms. Technically there aren't. There's one atom, but we're just turning it upside down. But because of the way our body interacts with the poi while they're maintaining these planes, we experience it as two different ones. If I had some device where my feet could go above my head and I could still spin poi, then you could do all of this shit without bending or breaking or anything like that. These are coherent systems if you get into that orientation and stay there without changing your plane again. That's kind of what all of this is about, this video. So I'm going to show you that from the front, well, here we go, buzzsaw. I'm going to take the far edge of the orbit and bend it out so that my planes are perpendicular. I'm going to bring my hands together. This looks like split op. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to change anything, but if I was doing that from the side, it looks like split same. So every atom has two different ways of perceiving it. They have this sharedness. You know, it's like if they're, so this is buzzsaw, feels like buzzsaw, feels like buzzsaw. Now it feels like opposite, right? This is split op. So there's the 90 degree thing is cool because at that moment it has qualities of both. If you're at one end, if you're a few degrees off from 90 in one way or the other, it'll feel more like buzzsaw or more like split same or more like split opposite. So that's just something that's cool to me about these things. So I'm going to present the well, let's start with just a basic atomic weave. I'm going to show you the stuff from the atom where you bend the edge of the orbit that's away from you, the far edge of the orbit out. This is the more common one. So this video, I'll just focus on that one. So let's do our buzzsaw, bend that edge of the orbit out, bring our hands together. The cross point, if you look straight down, is in between your hands. The circle, this negative space you're making with your hands here, the cross point, the nexus, will be inside. If I cross my arms though, and look down, you'll see the point where the tethers cross is now in front of my arms. That's the forward and reverse polarity thing. You could do the same stuff from a butterfly like this, from an opposite direction, bend the orbits out, and get into this. I'll show you that from the front. I'm just addressing the same atom slightly differently, right? So to get into those mixed polarities, there's no way for it to really sit, right? So what you're actually doing is putting one of the atoms, the buzzsaw atoms we did, on your side and turning, right? So I'm going to do this one. This is take the far edge of the orbit, bend it out, bring my hands together, cross them so that the tether, where they match, where the nexus is in front of my hands, right? Now I'm just going to turn my body 90 degrees, and I'm going to bring that slightly forward. You'll notice you can't really, because of our arms and shit, you can't really go beyond the line there without changing. So this is your weave, is changing sides. This is a weird one, but we'll get into that, because secretly, if you know the wavy weave, you already know that move. All right, so let's go back to now we're getting into the moves part. That's all the theory we'll really talk about. I got one more little diagram I want to show you. There's that opposite direction nature here. These are moving together, opposite directions. These are moving apart in opposite directions. But if we look at this, they're moving generally the same direction. So that's the kind of opposites, same, opposites, same. So that's where that kind of general idea comes up with. This is another little thing. If I was facing this way, I have my positive, positive, my negative, negative, like we were just doing with the nexuses here or here. If I take one of these planes, one of these orbits, and I move it across my body, boink, I'll end up with my hands on the non-native side, and I'll have this meshed polarity. If I uncross my arms, I get this guy. Boink. So if you have an inside the box, you can get inside the box at a 90-degree turn with your arms on the non-native side. If you put your arms on the native side after turning 90 degrees, you end up there. Okay, so that's the theory stuff. Now, we'll do a standard atomic weave, right? And I'm going to digress a little bit on this too. So we'll bring our hands up like that, bring our hands together. The nexus is inside. We cross our hands so the nexus is in front of my hands. If you look, one hand's on top, one hand's on the bottom. The bottom hand, I can bring the orbit up through that negative space, up through the negative space. And I'm switching which hand is on top. So this is a really simple in-swing atomic weave. We can also do that in reverse. I mean, of course, you could turn around to access the reverse, but I wanted to show you from this view. So that's our basic atomic weave. The reason it's important to understand the reverse thing is because I'm going to do all this now from the side. Bottom hand to the top, bottom hand to the top, bottom hand to the top, turn around, top hand to the bottom, top hand to the bottom, top hand to the bottom. It's reverse, so everything's backwards. Turn back around. Now, instead of turning my body, I'm going to take the top hand. I'm just going to turn 180 degrees-ish for just one beat. So I can take that top hand, bring it through, and put it on the bottom. I'll do the same on the other side. Like that. That's your notColeman, right? So from the front, that looks like this. This is kind of like the classic atomic weave. This is the first one I ever learned. Thank you, Christian. Okay, so now, since we are aware that we can do that from reverse too, we can do the same thing. So when you turn, your bottom hand will come up and become the top, right? You turn, bottom hand becomes the top. Turn, bottom hand becomes the top. So now, if you've ever heard of the introversion, that's where both poi go through the center at the same time. So you have to do it right at that 90, because right here, they'll both be able to enter, and you complete it like this. Both through, and then you got your turn. If I wanted to come back this way, I have to do one in-swing beat like that, and then come back through. One in-swing beat to get it back on top, come back through. One in-swing beat to get it back on the bottom, come back through. If you do a 360, you don't need that in-swing beat, right? Boom, you're already set up for boom, like that. And of course, we could do these in both directions. So that kind of shows you how there's a forward and a reverse of the notColeman and kind of the introversion. So now let's do one simple thing. Think wavy weave, right? I'm going to do our standard, the thing that we were doing our Inswing weave with, this guy, and just pause. And now think in terms of a crosser. So just your normal 2D crosser, this guy. Arms crossed, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around, whatever you want. But the idea is arms crossed, and you're using the timing of your turn to switch the direction, the relative direction to you. You can do the same thing with this atom, and it comes out just into your reverse vertical vertical. It works remarkably easily. Bunk, bunk. Now, what if I was just to repeat that? This is your wavy weave. So you've got a wavy weave right here. So I can pause on this side, do a couple in swings, wavy weave across, do a couple in swings, go back across, do a notColeman, in swing, wavy weave, in swing, whatever you want. Introversion through it. Ooh, throw your introversions in there. But you can kind of see how these are all starting to connect, right? That's very cool. There's a thing with the introversions that you can do where as you do this, my top hand's going to come to the bottom, my bottom hand's going to come to the top, and I'm going to kind of squat so that happens low. I'm going to do one in swing. I'm going to back this way, but I'm going to hold it really high. Ooh, kind of sloppy. One in swing, bring it low. One in swing, bring it high. Oh my goodness. There we go. But you can do like an introversion flower, and then you can also do it introversion anti-spin flower. These are things that are possible with this vertical versus vertical orientation. Now, also, from this atom, split your hands apart. I'll show you from here. So here's my atom, in swing weave. Split your hands apart, and look at how easy it is to go into your atomic flowers. Like that, or anti-spin. I'm doing quarter time atomic flowers there. You can also do like your caps, or you could just, you know, whatever you want, any kind of thing, you know, that's vertical versus vertical as far as like flowers, the atomic flowers or whatever, or just breaking. If you're breaking around and you end up in an orientation that's vertical versus vertical, you can always stop and go into your atom stuff. So that's how you can link like your notColeman and your introversions and those sort of atomic versus vertical versus vertical atoms together into a system. You probably know one of those moves, and that's like your transition theory thing to get into these other atomic moves. One more thing to consider. I've demonstrated everything with the one where you the one where you bend the outside edge of your orbit to get your atom. That's what we've been demonstrating all of this stuff in. What if we were to bend the inside edge of our orbit? Well, you get a lot of similar stuff. When you bend that way, the nexus is already in front of your arms, right? So no need to do the arm cross thing. In fact, you really can't, because in one of these orientations, the poi is parallel to your arms. This is kind of parallel to my arms. In the other one, where you bend the bottom out, you notice the poi is perpendicular to my arms. So that changes some of the moves that are available to us. Like I just demonstrated, you can't do the cross arm version of this one because it's perpendicular. It'll bounce off your arm. You could do an inversion like that. Just do it vertical versus vertical. But you can't do the cross arm thing that I demonstrated with the other one. But it does have that in-swing weave thing. You could do that. In-swing, 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 in-swing. So that looks real similar. But it's totally different execution, different move. This is the upside down version, right? You can also, instead of doing a crosser, this is just a turn. Just do an atomic turn and then go back. And you end up with the other wavy weave, the upside down wavy weave. I can turn around, can do all of that. There is a knockoff kind of introversion you can do, but it's really kind of funky and feels weird. But it's possible. And the same thing from that, spread your arms out and you end up being able to access, oh shit, being able to access all of your 3D flowers and shit. And breaks and all the stuff. One more thing, tracers, the last thing. So you could do tracers, just the one where the poi are parallel to your arm. That one's a lot easier to do certain things. You know, these are tracers. You can kind of, I'm going to make the poi a little longer. You can kind of link them up like this. While the one poi is just sitting there, you could do a 2-beat thing to make it a little bit crazier if you wanted. Like that. But you could do tracers, just get creative with it. I was demonstrating all those with the parallel to my arms one. You go perpendicular to your arms. You can still do tracers, but you have to do them slightly differently. Like that. It's a lot more, I don't know, it's not as comfortable, but I spent a lot more time practicing the other one. So that's just a thing. One more example for the difference. If we bend the outside of the orbit, so the poi are parallel to our arms, you can do this weave that feels a lot like the normal 4-beat, this guy. I call it the out and around atomic weave. That's kind of like my mnemonic device for it. Just the hand that's on the bottom goes out and around and comes on the top. Out and around, out and around, out and around. So this is your out and around atomic weave. You can't really do that where you bend the tethers out at the bottom like that. You can, it becomes more of notColeman-ish. You have to turn, boom, and bring one through like that. So this hand is going around this hand. Like that. And then you do that on the other side too. And then you just link them up. Out and around, out and around. And let me demonstrate this from the side. Like that. So now that's a lot of stuff to work with. If you have any questions, if something wasn't clear, just message me or leave a comment or something, and I'll make videos in the future to address any confusion. But I hope that kind of clarifies a bunch of stuff. This vertical versus vertical is where I started exploring atoms, and you've probably noticed during I demonstrate a lot tipped to this tilted. Tilted is my favorite. This is my favorite atom, because I think it's just visually interesting, and from the side it looks visually interesting too, you know. But we're relying, the majority of the effect comes from viewing the edge of the orbit, and that's one of my favorite things to do with poi patterns. Is instead of using the circle of the orbit to make patterns, you use the edge of the orbit and bending to make designs. But when you're bending like this, you might end up in weird different planes, you know, and so it's a good idea to understand the atoms. So if you pause in any of these spots, you know what you're doing, and you know exactly where to go, and you have a whole transition theory of things that you can play with. So have fun, explore, rewatch the confusing parts, And like I said, if there's a question you have, just leave it in the comments or message me, and I will try to describe it in text or make a video for you. All right, have fun.